In this lesson, we're going to look at Server Manager in more detail than we have previously. As we've already covered, Server Manager in Windows Server 2012 now manages multiple servers with the same ease that you would manage a single server. And it's doing this by remotely connecting to these machines using the WinRM capability, Windows Remote Management. In Windows Server 2012, this is enabled by default, or you can enable it with the configure-sm remoting PowerShell commandlet. In addition to enabling the Windows Remote Management, you have to be able to communicate with that server. And this is enabled by default as well. So when you enable remote management, it actually makes a firewall change. So if I look at my advanced settings on a firewall and look at my inbound rules, you'll see that I actually have a Windows Remote Management rule exception that's enabled. If I look at the detail of this, we'll actually see it's enabling port 5985. This is the port that Windows Remote Management uses. Now, if you've ever used this in previous versions, so WinRM 1.1 and earlier actually just used port 80. However, this did cause some conflicts and problems, so this was moved to 5985 in WinRM 2.0 and above. So I can remotely communicate to my servers. And you can see here I have Windows Server 2012 and 2008 R2 boxes, and I could also manage 2008 provided they have the .NET Framework 4.0 and Windows Management Framework 3.0. There is one additional change I have to make if I want to be able to look at performance data on 2008 R2 and 2008 servers. And Microsoft actually have a knowledge base article 2682011. And there's a hotfix that you would apply to those 2008 and 2008 R2 boxes that would enable us to see the performance data. So for example, as I scroll down, I can see those performance metrics. Now by default, these counters are not turned on, and you'll see what I'm showing here for FS01, performance counters not started. Now behind the scenes, what's actually happening is it's using performance monitoring, and there's a group of user-defined counters. So you see this Server Manager Performance Monitor. And these are the counters that Server Manager is actually looking at. By default, these are not actually running. Within Server Manager, I can just right-click on that server and say Start Performance Counters. What that is now doing, if I go back to that machine, it's now got that play symbol. Those counters are now actually running. And this is how Server Manager works. When you start up Server Manager, it's actually going and polling every server, and it's gathering that performance data. Now by default, it is polling every 10 minutes. But obviously I can change this if you wish to be more frequent or less frequent. Remember, every refresh, it is going and communicating to that server and getting this information. I can add additional servers very, very easily. I can start typing a name and just do find, and it's going to show me all those machines. I can select multiple machines and just add them by pressing the arrow. I can import them from a file, or I can actually just search DNS. By default, all those servers are scanned for what roles they have installed and will be added to the various groups. So for example, my domain controllers would all be added to my ADDS, my DNS servers, my Hyper-V boxes, any server running IIS. I can also create my own groups. So if I go into Manage, I can do Create Server Group. I give it a new name for this group and then add the machines I wish to be in that group. So for example, you can see I have one here called Test Servers. The scenario you may use this is, imagine you have different data centers, different line of business servers that Server Manager cannot automatically detect and classify. So I can create a Test Servers group, a line of business A group, a distributed service A group, and just add those servers in. And where it is very, very beneficial is on this dashboard, because then I see the overall health of each of those groups. So I can see my test servers when it's actually having a performance problem. And I can actually click refresh to make it go and repoll and recheck the status of those boxes. And this little flag is showing me there's a notification. And right now it will just be showing me it's doing that refresh operation. If there were problems, this would actually turn red to alert me that there is an issue. So if I jump back to my test servers as a good example, I can see all the events from the servers I select. So if I select 2012 and 2012 standard, I see all the events. Now I can filter. I can say, well, maybe I only want to see those types. I can see all my services. I can control them. I see my best practice analyzer results if I've actually run that for these servers. And I can see my performance data. So one of the great things I can do here, and is what I've actually triggered in the background, is I can actually set performance alerts. So if the CPU goes over 85% or the memory is over a certain amount, it's going to raise an alert. And you notice I've actually seen these on these servers. And the reason is, on this test box, I'm running a processor hog utility. This is consuming all of the processor on that machine. So I'll release that and I'll say I'm done. And now what I should see is my performance CPU should have gone back down to a normal amount. Now within Server Manager, if I force a refresh, for example, it's going to go and recheck, talk to that server, and I'll get the new performance characteristics of that box. But you can see I had these two peaks from where I ran that utility earlier. And that was actually flagged as a problem. If I went back to my dashboard, notice I had 7 performance alerts. I can click that and it shows me exactly what it was. It's telling me on this server, it was the CPU alert counter and there were 7 instances of that. So it makes it easy for me to get a very high level understanding of what is happening on those servers. It's important to realize Server Manager is doing far more than just giving you this dashboard event view. As we already saw, I can add and remove roles and features. I can create these groups. I can fire off all the other tools whose functionality is not built into Server Manager. But as we're going to see further on in this course, I can manage things like my storage services. I can manage my local disks. I can manage my storage pools, which are a collection of disks grouped logically. I can manage shares, iSCSI. I can manage my IP address management. I can manage remote desktop services. So this is far more than just giving me basic event data. The goal of this is this will become the central hub for all of the configuration you actually need to do. And I would expect with each new version of Windows, we will see more and more functionality moved into Server Manager. A great example is a domain controller. It now leverages Server Manager as part of that promotion process. So I would strongly urge you to try out Server Manager. Run it in your environment, connect to multiple machines, deploy the Windows Management Framework 3.0 with the .NET Framework 4 to some of your 2008 and 2008 R2 servers and manage them. I'm doing all of this management from a Windows 8 machine. So I've installed remote server administration tools and managing from Windows 8. So the whole goal is I do all my management remotely. If I do have maybe a smaller screen, I can zoom out so I can see more on my screen, or I can zoom in. So I have some options to actually customize how my environment is displayed. One common question I do hear a lot is, well, I've customized Server Manager, I've added all the servers I wish to monitor into my own groups. How do I take this to another machine? So behind the scenes, Server Manager actually saves an XML file to the user's profile who is currently using it. So for example, I'm currently logged in as user John. So if I go to my profile and look at my app data, this is stored in roaming, which means if I was using roaming profiles, this would move between all the different machines I'm using. So if I go to Microsoft, Windows, Server Manager, you see server list. That is the configuration. If I was to open this up in Notepad, you can now see it's the list of servers I have. You can see I've got that test group and the servers I wanted in that test group. So all of your configuration is stored in this XML file. So if you wanted to share your configuration with other users, you can give them this XML file and tell them to put it into this folder in their own profile.